Okay, so I've stopped dosing NOPOX altogether now. Completely had enough of it. I couldn't quite figure out what was wrong with my system. I was dosing and watching the nitrates fall, and the phosphate was falling. Not as much as a nitrate, which we all know with NOPOX by Red Sea, that with phosphate removal it doesn't do the best job really. It's more of a nitrate it gets down. But anyway, I've done it for around 7 months with about a month gap in between because I neglected my tank a bit, and picked it back up again. And there's just something missing with my tank. I just couldn't quite put my finger on it. So I was doing all the trace elements and amino acid supplements and Reef energy and all that, and skimming wet, and nitrates got from about 60 parts per million down to about 2 parts per million, and the phosphate down to about 0.02, which is nice. But the corals were starved. The corals were completely starved. I know people have written a lot of positive stuff about NOPOX, but I just thought it was crap really for my system. My friend only dosed for a few weeks and his Monty started to recede. So all in all, I lost more than probably about 8 corals I lost in total. I think the fluctuation of the pH it causes as well doesn't help. If you've got probes like I have with an Apex, as soon as you drop in the NOPOX, you'll see your pH drop. It soon gets back up again, but it's still a fluctuation in pH. Growth stopped as well, because I think it has an effect on, you know, the uptake of calcium carbonate and the uptake of calcium itself, and for the corals to grow. Polyp extension was poor. If you look at some of my early videos before I started doing my NOPOX videos, you'll see how bright and puffy my corals are, and everything's nice like it is now. I mean, I've only been stopped probably about a week and a half now, and already my corals are full of energy. And to be honest, it didn't really impact on the fish much. NOPOX, it isn't good, is it? You know, the fish ain't bothered about nitrate. So it didn't affect the fish, but corals, I'll show you my bird's nest on the left hand side of left tower isn't what it used to be. It had a lot of slow tissue necrosis on the left hand one. A couple of lobos flaked out. I've got a chalice that weren't doing great and just dried up and starved. So all in all, I was chasing numbers, and although on paper my nitrate had come down loads, it just shows you at times that nutrients is what's needed for these corals to really expand and grow. So with higher nitrates, you are going to get nuisance algae if you're not careful. With higher phosphate, you are going to prevent growth. You are going to prevent coloration with phosphate and nitrate. You are going to get browning out of SPS coral. So maybe in a full SPS system, ultra low nutrient system might be great. Zeovit, Red Sea, NOPOX. But with LPS, I just don't think they liked it at all. Not at all. But it's strange how it was my SPS that was suffering as well. So, and I've read some horror stories on NOPOX, but there's more good than bad out there. So I just want to put it out there that every tank's different, but me and my friend, it can't be no coincidence. We've both stopped dosing NOPOX and our tanks are back to how they were. My coloration's great. I'll give you a little tour of which corals have suffered and which corals weren't affected. Obviously there's a lot of corals that have gone now because I had to get rid of them because they'd receded that much, like a flowerpot coral had died as well. And was creating phosphate, because once a coral dies or starts to die, obviously you're going to increase your nutrients in the tank. But I'll show you the corals that are still struggling, and I'm not sure will bounce back. So this was a beautiful mint green chalice. Just look at it. It looks starved. You know, you could say, oh, did I overdose? No, I didn't. I never got cloudy water or or never got any ill effects. You get cloudy water to begin with from algal blooms and that, but it just blatantly speaks out as just starved, really. If you come up here, these candy canes, I got these, these weren't in the best health initially anyway. These two heads you see that are non-existent on the right, they weren't there anyway, but the others, they were doing alright when I went in my tank. That one at the top's doing okay, but these ones started to starve, but that's the best I've looked since I stopped doing NOPOX. Over here, there's a crab having a good munch away. This Lobo receded completely. Very slowly, might I add. This is nothing that's happened overnight. This is 7 months dosing of NOPOX. You have to dose it for quite some time for the bacteria to accumulate in your system, especially for the PHB bacteria, which is phosphate harbouring bacteria. So it does take time. Now my bird's nest, you'll see areas that have started to strip. So them areas are starting to slowly come back. The other bird's nest over here is doing much better already. Chalices weren't affected. Got the odd hitchhiker softie that's made its own way into the tank. I didn't put a lot of these softies in here, they just started to grow. This large meat coral, donut coral, is done very well. All in all, my experience with NOPOX hasn't been great. I mean, people will tell you different things, but I can tell you that if you start chasing numbers, which a lot of people on the forum say, you could be asking for trouble if you're not listening to your tank. Listen to the tank itself by viewing what corals are looking like and act accordingly a lot quicker, rather than just thinking, oh, you know, this is a Red Sea product and look at the numbers, it's working, it's doing right. But something was definitely lacking in my system that Red Sea want you to purchase to put back in. And I don't think the Reef Energy had that ingredient. Could have been a fluctuation in pH as well. But either way, the tank's looking back to its old self already after stopping dosing, so I'll see how we get on. Another thing to add as well is that if you've got a top off, because you have to skim wet with NOPOX, which is what Red Sea recommends, I find that the salinity really fluctuates because you're skimming wet. Obviously your top off is coming on more often, putting fresh reverse osmosis water in your tank, and it can reduce your salinity if you don't keep an eye on it. Sometimes I found that skimming dry then skimming wet kind of eased off on that, but I did notice an increase in phosphate over time if I continued to skim dry. So either way, I just couldn't win with NOPOX. But, you know, feel free to comment below on any of your positive experience with NOPOX, or challenge any of my negative ones. But I can tell you now, I spent a long time in this hobby, and in many of my systems I've never carbon dosed before because I didn't like the idea of putting chemicals in my tank, and I never will again. I'm going to start using some phosphate absorbing biopills. I'd rather use absorption than actually drop an ethanol based carbon source into my tank by form of a liquid chemical, and I'll let you know how I get on with that. But so far it's looking great since I stopped. Thanks a lot. It's Budgie's Box of Water.